think I'm going to have you guys stand throughout the entire speech. You feel so much more respectful. Can I tell them to sit down? Yeah. Be seated, please. Thank you. My wife was a student at Moriah more than 30 years ago. Things have changed. None of you here believe in bigotry or discrimination, do you? So why does Moriah discriminate against short people? You guys know the story of the man who gets a call from his doctor, and the doctor says, "Sit down, because we have good news. I have really bad news, but then I have worse news." And the man says, "What's the bad news?" "That's the bad news." Did I just trigger something? Okay. He says, "What's the bad news?" And the doctor says, "The results are in, and you have 24 hours to live." And the man says, "What could possibly be worse than that?" And the doctor says, "I've been trying to call you since yesterday." So I have bad news and worse news. There's a little bit of a delayed reaction there in the back. The bad news is that you have to listen to me for about 20 minutes. The worst news is it's a Jewish 20 minutes. So we could be here all day. Actually, from here I have to go to Channel 10 to do a TV appearance about a new book that I just published with the actress Pamela Anderson. It's called Lust for Love. So there is a time limit. And then I have to prepare for a show tonight on ABC called Q&A. And because it's going to be a controversial show, they're going to be speaking about Cardinal Pell and all kinds of controversial stuff. And I don't live in Australia. I really have to read up. So I'm here to share a slightly different message with you that is very relevant to my life, and I think relevant to yours as well. Five years ago, the Israeli Knesset, the parliament, was invited to Auschwitz for the very first time, as the parliament. And I attended. And it was in the dead of winter. And I began to understand what it must have been like to have been an inmate in Auschwitz, near Krakow, in winter. I had visited in the summer many times, but never in the winter. The cold was bone-chilling. The ceremony was very moving. I walked in with the chief rabbi of Israel. He was holding a Torah. When it all ended, I decided there was one place I had to visit. There was a place I had to see. And I took the train from Krakow to Warsaw by myself. I arrived in Warsaw. There was 3 feet of snow. And I went to Mila 18, this famous address of where the last fighters of the Warsaw Ghetto were. Mila 18 today is an apartment complex. I knock on the woman's door. She speaks Polish. I speak English. She had no clue what I was doing there. Wrong Mila 18. I start digging under the snow until I found the spot. We're on the 15th of April, 1943. A 23-year-old young man, not much older than any of you, in the last days of his life, gave a speech that would resonate throughout Jewish history. He gathered around him his 700 last living fighters, all emaciated, all starving, with nothing but small caliber broken weapons that he had confiscated from the Germans, Molotov cocktails. He gathered them around and he said, "Tonight is the Passover Seder." And none of them were religious. Tonight is the Passover Seder. And tonight is our night of freedom. We today will be free. And you ask me, how will we be free when we are caged like rats, surrounded by the SS and their most lethal general, Jürgen Stroop, who was personally sent by Heinrich Himmler to destroy every last remnant of the ghetto? How will we be free? He said, tonight is freedom night. Because tonight you have the choice between death and death. There's no choice between life and death. I can't give you life. Those of you listening to me tonight will all die. But you will choose how you die. Even in the Warsaw Ghetto here, where there is a last shred of hope, there is still a choice. We can either die like victims, defenseless, or we can take these monsters with us. I enjoin you to fight, to rise and to fight. And that night they launched the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising that would last only 3 weeks. And they killed about 800 German soldiers, SS, monsters, beasts, animals. And then they were killed almost to the last man and last woman, 6 survivors. And on the last night, on May 8th, 1943, Mordechai and Alevich gathered together all of his fighters, and they took the last grenades that they had, and they said, tonight we also choose between death and death. We will never, ever be the Nazis' slaves. And they detonated all of their grenades, and 700 of them are buried in that spot that I dug out from the snow at Mila 18, a mass grave of 700 people who started a new concept that had almost been lost for 2,000 years. The Jew as fighter. The Jew who believes in resistance. The Jew who believes that he or she is not better than anyone, but is certainly not worse either. The Jew who believes that after 2,000 years of being demonized and being called God killers and being told that we drink the blood of children and being told that we poison the wells of Europe and being told that we're parasites and fleas who, like barnacles, suck out the marrow of a nation's lifeblood, that we have a right to live in dignity and to be free. I had to go to that spot. The day, April 15th, 1943, field of battle, the Warsaw Ghetto. Commander, Mordechai and Alevich, 23 years old. Before he died, on the last day that he died, Moses turned to the Jewish people and he said, "Today I have a choice to put before you between life and death, uvacharta b'chaim, and you must choose life." Do you know how few Jews throughout history had that choice to choose life? Do you know for how many people they were robbed of that choice? There was no such choice. We were a people that were persecuted and decimated, destroyed and annihilated. And then, after the Holocaust, where 1 out of 2 Jews was lost at a rate of 10,000 a day, we decided to choose life. We decided to become a new nation. We decided to reclaim a tiny little strip of land that would serve as the epicenter of Jewish life. And my God, how majestic and glorious that country has become. You're talking about the only country in the Middle East where women enjoy completely equal rights. You're talking about the only country in the Middle East where a gay man or a gay woman need not fear that they're going to be hung from a crane, Tehran, have a tire burnt around them until they're completely aflame, Hamas in Gaza, shot, persecuted, arrested, Egypt. Do you know last year, my organization, the World Values Network, honored Caitlyn Jenner. Now, Caitlyn Jenner, when she was Bruce Jenner, was the most famous male athlete in the United States, maybe the world. And I sat with her and I said, "Caitlyn, you've got to be a champion for Israel." She said, "Rabbi Shmuley, I already am. I have no Jewish relatives. I have a lot of close Jewish friends, but I will come to your event and I will speak proudly and boldly for Israel." I said, "Caitlyn, sum up why. What will your speech be?" She said, "Because if I'm in Israel, if I step north, I'm decapitated. If I go east, I'm shot. If I go south, I'm hung. And Israel, I am free." Could you imagine a country in the Middle East that gives people their dignity? Could you imagine a country in the Middle East where an Arab judge sends an Israeli president, Moshe Katsav, to prison for taking advantage of women, at least those were the allegations upon which he was convicted. An Arab judge sends a Jewish president of the state of Israel, first Jewish state in 2,000 years, to jail for disrespecting a woman. Could you imagine it happening in the Middle East? Any other place in the Middle East? And now you have the choice. Now you have the choice. Not between death and death. We've come a long way to be alive and free as Jews in Australia, in the United States, in South Africa, in Britain, in Nebraska, in California. We've come a long way. The choice today is whether you will be fighters, whether you will be warriors, or whether you will be passive and allow that tiny little country, which is the only hope for humanity in the Middle East, to slowly be so desecrated, so demonized, and so vilified that it can't do its good work. Because classical anti-Semitism in our time has morphed into modern anti-Israel bias, prejudice, and even hatred. Do you know that we had an American congresswoman in my country say 2 weeks ago that we Jews buy off politicians with our money? Are you kidding me? And we were outraged when Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who had been in Congress 3 weeks, and I wrote to her and I said, Congresswoman, you're a Muslim woman. You're the first woman to wear Muslim dress in the halls of Congress. It's beautiful. I wear a yarmulke. You and I are kin. You and I proudly celebrate our religious distinction. When I wear a yarmulke, I don't want to feel self-conscious. I want to see other people, other religions that celebrate their faith. I said, but you came into the halls of Congress becoming the first Muslim woman to win a seat in the history of the United States. You took the oath of office holding Thomas Jefferson's Quran. And you're using that incredible platform to demonize the Jews? That's what you fought for? Do you think that's why Washington crossed the Delaware? Do you think that's why Lincoln spoke at Gettysburg? Do you think that's why Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave his famous For Freedom speech to teach Americans never to fear Hitler, so that you can come to Congress and take a nation that 70 years ago experienced a genocide and say, and you're all about money, and all you do is buy people off, and it's not because you have convictions, not because you have values, not because you have things to believe in, but because you Jews worship at the altar of the almighty dollar. My friends, there are things that are happening today, things that are being said today, that are simply astonishing. And you have to ask yourselves whether you're going to be a Mordechai Amalevich and fight, not because you're better, but because you're right. Because Israel is not the great Jewish hope. No, Jews, thank God, live very comfortably in Sydney and in Melbourne and in Adelaide and in Perth. In many ways, Israel is an incredible complication for Jews, since it has become the magnet for global anti-Semitism. It's a convenient mask for anti-Semitism. No. Israel is the great Arab hope. You see, every time we've gone to Arab dictators and said, you're slaughtering and brutalizing your own people. Every time we've gone to Mahmoud Abbas and said, you were elected for 4 years, now you're in power for 14 years. Every time we've gone to Hamas and said, really? You aid and abet honor killings of 15, 16-year-old girls? You encourage their brothers and their cousins to put them to death because they have a girlfriend? Are you kidding us? Why do you do this? They always respond, don't preach to us from the shores of Australia. Don't preach to us from Paris or London. This isn't Europe, this is the Middle East. You guys have no idea. Our people are animals. If we don't cage them, if we don't brutalize them, if we don't end the Arab Spring and impose dictatorships, they are going to run amok and it's going to be like Libya and Syria. And there's only one country that removes the excuse from these brutal dictators and says, don't preach to us about what can't be done in the Middle East. Look at Israel, where a newspaper editor can say whatever the heck he wants and nothing happens to him. Look at Israel, where the Prime Minister of Israel was just recommended for indictment on Friday. And I like this Prime Minister very much, and I've known him for 30 years. But it shows you the country, a rule of law. Do you know when Yasser Arafat died, he died on the Forbes 400 list of the richest men in the world? He had stolen more than $1.4 billion from the poorest people on earth, from the Palestinians, the poorest people on earth. Do you know that Mahmoud Abbas's children, Tariq and Yasser, control the construction industry, the sale of all cigarettes? It's a kleptocracy. And Israel is the great Arab hope. If Israel thrives and survives, then no Arab brutal dictator will ever have an excuse to slaughter or imprison his people by saying that this is the Middle East and it's the only thing that works. Because now we know that democracy works. Will you be fighters for Israel? Will you get to university and hear all the intersectionality? Will you hear all the arguments of the Students of Justice in Palestine? Will you hear all the arguments about Israel as an apartheid state, which is almost laughable for anyone who's ever visited Israel? Will you be fighters? Or will you absorb that toxicity and in order to fit in, begin to parrot the same untruths? That is the question. I place before you a choice today. Will you be passive? Because Jews don't merely survive. There are three things that you can do with your lives. You can, God forbid, die for a great cause. I do not recommend that. And we Jews utterly reject martyrdom. We hate martyrdom. You can also live for a cause. That's a beautiful thing. The highest. You can fight for a cause. You can fight for a cause. In that same Warsaw ghetto, there was a man named Yosel Arakover. He had 11 children. He was a Ger Chassid, very religious, ultra-Orthodox Jew. And as Jürgen Stroop brought up the artillery to finish off the ghetto, 10 of his 11 children were already dead. He says to his youngest boy, raise your head above the parapet to see where the artillery is so we know how long we have. The boy raises his head. He takes a bullet between the eyes and he falls down dead. And with this, Yosel Arakover now knows there is no hope left. And he decides in his last moment of life, because the only thing he plans to do now is use a Molotov cocktail to kill whatever German soldiers break into his hideout. He takes out a pen and paper and he writes a letter to God. And that letter to God has since become to be known through the Israeli writer Tzvi Kulitz as the last will and testimony of Yosel Arakover. And he wrote the following. He said, God, you have robbed me of all hope by allowing for the murder of my children. I have no future. You have robbed me of love when the woman who I cherish, my wife, died of typhoid before my very eyes, and I was helpless to save her. You have robbed me of my freedom, incarcerated as I am like an animal in this destroyed hovel of what used to be my Jewish community. And then he said words that will resonate throughout the ages. Say, but I have one thing left, and you will never take it from me. I still have my faith in you. I still believe in you. You have done everything in your power to make me deny you. You have done everything to make me not want to believe in you or not to believe that you're good. You have done everything to prove to me that I call out into the ether and there is no answer. But I'm a Jew and I'm a fighter and I'm stronger than you, and you will never take my faith from me. I die as I have lived, a believing Jew. And his last words, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, I proclaim it today, now, and forever, that there is one God. He is my God. And He is one. The power to never be defeated. To be a Yisrael, to be he who wrestles with God. A year ago, I sat with the Prime Minister of Israel in New York. With me was Elisha Wiesel, Elie Wiesel's son, his only son. And we were giving the Prime Minister of Israel the Elie Wiesel Prize for posthumously to Yoni Netanyahu for leading the Entebbe rescue mission 40 years earlier. And the Prime Minister loved his older brother. His older brother is Israel's greatest military hero. And I sit with the Prime Minister. You can watch us all on YouTube whenever you're allowed to after class. And I say to the Prime Minister, we're giving this award to you for your brother, great fighter against all odds. And I said to him, you know, Prime Minister, your political rival, Shimon Peres, your arch rival throughout your career, was defense minister when your brother was killed, and he buried him. And at his funeral, he said, as Shimon Peres had an ocean of tears flowing down his cheeks, he said, today we lay to rest the magnificent Yoni Netanyahu. And then he started to cry, and he said, Yoni, Yoni, where will Israel ever be without you? And today I ask all of you, whatever your name may be, where will Israel be without you? Where will this majestic little country fighting for its survival and its good name that is so vilified? And we can defeat all of its opponents in open debate. I have debated the foremost Israel haters in the world. It's all on YouTube. The debates, I'm not saying they're easy, but they're not that difficult because factually Israel destroys the human rights record of any of its critics. I was debating a man named Rabbi Shmuley, an Israeli who served in the 1967 war, moved to Oxford, became one of the world's greatest experts on international relations, world famous. He's also one of Israel's foremost critics. He actually refers, on this panel where I debated, which again you can watch at Oxford, he referred to, there was a woman with him, a nice Palestinian woman who we had dinner just before, who called Israel and the IDF a Nazi state, and the IDF was the Gestapo. And Rabbi Shmuley gets up and he says, Israel is guilty of the longest occupation in modern history. Now in Oxford, in the debate, you can't interrupt the speaker. You only have 8 minutes. But you are allowed to do something called the point of order. You can raise your hand and say point of order, and the speaker can either receive the point of order or they can reject it. So I go, point of order! So Rabbi Shmuley, I was the rabbi at Oxford for 11 years. He knows me quite well. He says, okay, Rabbi Shmuley, go ahead. I said, Avi, you're a world-renowned historian. Did you just say what I thought you said? Israel is guilty of the longest occupation. I said, even if we accept that in 1967 that Israel decided to occupy the West Bank, Yudan, Shimon, Judea, and Samaria, which of course is not true because Israel was attacked by Jordan, it was a defensive war. And even if we say that there was a state there that Israel's occupying, a Palestinian state, which of course is not true because there's never been a Palestinian state, that land was occupied by Jordan illegally after the disintegration of the British Mandate in 1947, and only 3 countries recognized Jordanian sovereignty over the West Bank, and nobody complained. I said, even if we say all that, even if we say Israel's brutal and horrible, disgusting, vile, the longest occupation, I said, you're a historian. How could you get up and lie? How could you get up in front of 1,000 Oxford students knowing that this is being recorded forever and lie? Because in 1950, China invaded a tiny little helpless country called Tibet. And that was 17 years before Israel fought to defend itself in the Six-Day War. And China's been occupying that tiny little land since 1950. The Dalai Lama has never once been allowed to visit. I did a public event with the Dalai Lama. I prayed with him. This is in Birmingham, Alabama. Again, you can watch that. It's funny, my son was with me. My son has this long beard. He grabs my son's beard and he starts stroking my son's beard. He's a very playful person, very nice man, the Dalai Lama. Actually, a very pleasant man. And I said to him, I pray for you that you will one day be able to see your homeland. 1950, he's been in exile. In India, and yet, the same people who were debating me and calling for a boycott of Israel were calling their children before the debate on this. They were calling their kids on an iPhone. And where are iPhones made? Where are they made? They're not made in decided he didn't want the iPhone to cost $20 million. He only wanted it to cost $500,000 per month. So he decides he has to make it in China at Foxconn, which has been itself accused of horrendous human rights abuse. You know the Foxconn has nets, right? So the employees try to kill themselves, can actually land on a net. Horrible stuff. So you have China who is occupying Tibet. You have China who has this company, and they've promised they're going to make significant alterations to their 24/7 culture of work. And all the guys who are calling for a boycott of like SodaStream, which gives Palestinians jobs 10 times the wage that they would earn working for a Palestinian-run business. They earn 10 times the wage of Israeli-run business. They all called their kids with an iPhone. They had no issue with China occupying Tibet. They all eat Turkish delights, even though Turkey has been occupying Cyprus since 1974, and nobody cares. They all drink Stolichnaya or Smirnoff vodka, even though Russia has been occupying Crimea. Brutal occupation, and nobody cares. This has nothing to do with justice. This is Jew hatred, pure and simple. Because Israel tried to even give back these lands under Prime Minister Ehud Barak in 2001. They tried again under Prime Minister Ehud Olmert in 2008. When Israel conquered these lands in 1967, they said they wanted to give everything back. And the Arabs responded in a special conference they held in Khartoum with the famous three no's. You all know the famous three no's, right? No negotiations, help me. No peace. No recognition. And it hasn't much changed since. But my friends, with the remaining time left to me, I want to talk to you about the dignity and infinite value of every Arab life. If you took all of the Arab-Israeli wars and put them together, since 1947, so that's 1947, 1956, 1967, 1973, 1982, First Lebanon War, 2006, Second Lebanon War, the three wars in Gaza. If you took all the Arab casualties and blamed every single one on Israel, including suicide bombers who blew themselves up, if you blamed everyone on Israel, the numbers you would get to, they say, that have died in all the wars together are about 35,000, 40,000. And we should never minimize a life, except if it's a terrorist life, then he's forfeited his life, and he's erased the countenance of God from his image. But let's say we blamed Israel for all of that. We're at 35,000, 40,000. Let's double it, 80,000. And let's imagine Israel has no right to defend itself. So now Israel is guilty of killing 80,000 for no reason. Just kill them, because Jews are bloodthirsty. Do you know, and that's over the past 70 years, right? Do you know that Israel has a neighbor called Syria? Where 500,000 Arabs have been murdered, slaughtered, brutalized, bombed, dismembered, beheaded, disemboweled, decapitated. In 4 years. And nobody gives a damn. Nobody. Does anyone here know how many United Nations Security Council resolutions have been passed against Syria for killing 500,000 Arabs? Anyone know? How many UN Security Council resolutions passed? Anyone know? Anyone here know how to make a zero by putting their index finger with their thumb? In the same time, there have been about 60 or 70 resolutions passed against Israel. 500,000 Arabs. And I want to tell you how bad it is. I have a very close friend in the United States named Bret Stephens. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the New York Times. He's a conservative, politically, loves Israel, big defender of Israel, hates President Trump. He thinks President Trump is an embarrassment to the presidency. So we had a debate, me and Bret, just about Trump's foreign policy and his approach to Israel. So I said to Bret, you do realize President Obama in 2013 told Hafez al-Assad, the butcher of Damascus, that if you use poison gas against your people, and children especially, that's a red line. Obama famously says a red line, the United States will take military action. Well, of course, Assad gassed his own people using sarin gas, mustard gas. We all remember the horrific images of children coughing up blood and foaming at the mouth, and we'll never forget those vile images that were seared onto our memory. Because while the Holocaust happened before Instagram, the genocide of Sunni Muslims in Syria is happening in the age of social media. So these images are there every day. And President Obama took no action. He made a deal with Vladimir Putin that Putin would remove the weapons of mass destruction, the chemical weapons. And then, of course, when Trump was elected, it happened again, and Trump fired 59 United States Tomahawk missiles at Assad, not once but twice. So I said this to Brett. I said, look, I'm not arguing about Trump. I'm just saying that Arab lives in Syria matter, and the world has watched them destroyed, decimated, brutalized, killed, and no one took action until Trump fired these missiles. So then Brett said, Shmuley, it was a pinprick. 59 missiles. It's a pinprick, it was nothing. So I'm going to conclude with the story that he told me. I'm going to conclude the story that I told him that night. My friends, one of the greatest Jews that ever lived was Elie Wiesel. He was 15 when he was taken from his home in Sighet in Romania and deported with his father, Shlomo Elisha, to Auschwitz. His mother was gassed instantly, and his little sister Tzipora was gassed instantly. And when he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1986, he built 2 schools for Ethiopian Jewish children that run and exist till today. They're called the Beit Zipporah schools. They're named after his 8-year-old sister. We have pictures of his sister. And one of the great honors of my life was to know and love Elie Wiesel. I started hosting him at Oxford University 30 years ago, and I was very close to him. About 3 or 4 months before he died, because I used to go to visit him all the time in New York, I asked him this question. I said, Rebbe Eliezer, which was my term of affection for him. I said, Rebbe Eliezer, there's a debate going on until today whether Franklin Roosevelt is a hero to the Jews or a villain. Hero because he defeated Hitler. Villain because he refused to allow Jews in during the Holocaust by and large. No visas were granted. And he didn't bomb Auschwitz. You were in Auschwitz. Would you have wanted the United States Air Force to level and flatten the camp? He said to me, of course. I said, well, wait a second. You would have died. You were 15 and you would have died. And ironically, you would have been killed by the Americans, not by the Germans. And he said something to me that I will never forget. He said, I would have died. But I would have died knowing there is justice in the world. I would have died knowing there is justice in the world. And Mordechai Malevich was telling his fighters, you're going to die, but you will die knowing there is justice in the world. That you have brought about some tiny, tiny measure of justice. My friends, we will not die, we will live, God willing. Layamos Kiefia, there's a new age of Jews flourishing and prospering and living. But will you live with the knowledge that there is justice in the world? Or will you be passive witnesses to the injustice? Will you decide it's too much to actually get involved? Or will you rise, Jewish people? Thank you very much.